For this class, I was first assigned the role of manager, which I'd already previously had a go at last year within commercial music strategies. I was excited to take on the role again, as I knew this time round I would know how to make better decisions and be more confident within my choices that I put in this time. In the role of the manager, I knew that communication would be a really, really important key to making sure everything worked properly in the way it should do. So because of this, we agreed to have weekly Zoom meetings where we would discuss what point we were at and what we needed to do next in order to be successful within this project. One of the other roles I took on was a singer and part of the female duo dynamic within. One of the other roles I took on was a singer and part of the female duo dynamic within Neon Daydream. This was quite interesting for me as one of the roles was songwriting. I don't exactly have very strong songwriting skills, but I was really interested in learning, and I mostly helped with writing the melody and editing the melody of the second song, Retraction. For recording, we went up to Glasgow once the pandemic permitted it in the middle of April, where we got to record in a private studio. One of the first points of call I had as a manager was to sit everyone down and speak about what everyone's interests were in music and what their preferred genres were, and to find out how we could possibly mesh them together to make something that we were all really excited about producing. Once we had the act, it was quite simple to come up with the name. I just sat with a bit of pen and paper and I googled In regards to designing our logo for our band, our team agreed that this was a very important starting point for our marketing strategies we would be using on our social media accounts. I went with a simple design as I wasn't well versed in photo editing before I began this project. I decided each member should have a triangle that was specifically their own colour, which then gave each member an identity within the band and something that would represent them on our social media accounts. I thought this would be a good idea as it let our fans kind of connect with us on a little bit more of a personal level on sites such as Instagram and Twitter. Here's just a little bit more about the logo designing for our band. It went through a really long process to get to the finished product that you will see on our social media accounts and at the end of this slideshow. It started off as a drawing, and then I recreated that in a Word document, which then went to Canva, and then I recreated it eventually using an app called PixArt on my phone, which let me give the neon glow vibe that I was looking for. I also took on the role for creating the music video for our first track, Rise, which ended up being the most popular track and got released as our single. For this, I had to learn how to use Final Cut Pro and spent a very long time looking through different websites on Google which would allow me to use video clips that were royalty free and therefore I wouldn't have any copyright infringements attached. This is where I found a website called Videasy, which I found a lot of videos that were neon themed that I liked. I sifted through a lot of them and found ones I wanted to use, and then I joined them and edited them together in Final Cut Pro, and eventually used a lot of digital markers to caption each lyrics onto the clip.
So we decided that the best option was that we all took on multiple roles within the band, since there was only 4 of us. So I took on the 3 main roles of the social media and promotions manager, the songwriter and the artist. So I wrote the lyrics for track 2, and I also took on the lead vocals for this track. And then additionally I ran the social media accounts, helping to keep everyone up to date with the bands and to let them know what we had coming and what we were doing behind the scenes. At the very beginning we had a completely different song from the 2 that you're hearing at the end of the process now. Aaron had come up with a track that was very much EDM music, and we soon realised that it wasn't really the vibe what we were looking for, but also it wasn't really suited to the sound of me and Lauren's voice. So after that we realised we had to go out there and really do a bit more research on the sound that we were after. So in order to do that, Aaron went and took a look at mine and Lauren's music Instagram pages to listen to the covers and the way we usually sing, which isn't too dissimilar from each other, which made then producing a sound come a little better and easier. He gave us the example of Leave a Light On by Tom Walker, as this has quite a slow paced verse and then it builds up into this powerful chorus, and so we decided that we really liked that sound and it would go well with our voices, and so we decided to change and try and format the song ideas around them, as well as them sounding like that in a sense of the structure. Aaron also decided that he liked the instrumental elements that were used by Tom Walker and artists similar. So throughout, specifically Rise, and which is track 1, and slightly within track 2, you can hear the same sound elements as Tom Walker's Leave a Light On. So I was the main writer for track 2, which we called Retraction. The songwriting process for Retraction took place over several FaceTime and Zoom calls with myself and Lauren, whose role was to help with the editorial, for example making lyrical alterations or cuts and helping to produce the melody side of the track. So we started by creating a basic guitar structure, and then I started to write the lyrics from that. The lyrics, we kind of made them tell a story from the start to the end of overcoming heartbreak and then finding yourself again after having had to depend on someone for so long. And with our target audience, we thought that these lyrics would be relatable, as young adults and older teenagers find themselves going through these issues, and they're at a stage in their life where they're supposed to be finding themselves. So after we'd created the simple acoustic version of the track, we then handed it over to Aaron, who was our digital instrumentalist. He then created the more electronic sound that you hear on the final track now. Once he'd created the basis for that electronic sound, him, Lauren and myself all went to the studio to record the vocals for the track, and then the song went on between Anne and our tech guy Craig to be finally produced. My other role, as I mentioned before, was as the social media and promotions manager. So as a social media manager, I ran a Twitter and Instagram page to help gain the band a following and then to help keep them up to date with the plans that we were making for the band. So we created this imperfect branding for the group to keep ourselves from needing to come across as too professional at these early stages. And the biggest means for social media was to release a small teaser for each track, which would then entice people to come to our open day, and then that would help us choose our single. So the Instagram and the Twitter was really all about drawing people in to help us then get opinions on what song we would then want to release, which meant that it wasn't just our decision.
I was chosen to be the producer due to the amount of experience I have in GarageBand and Logic. The songs I produce are mainly created through synthesizers and rarely real instruments other than vocals. Due to this, I'm most comfortable in and around the world of EDM and pop, so we carried forth the idea to be a synth pop band. I'm also a practice songwriter along with Kim, so we had the responsibility of writing lyrics, chords and melodies. I edited them whilst guiding the vocalists on recording techniques. Track 1 was written, composed and produced by myself. I was assisted with Lauren's vocals to complete the song. I had carefully constructed lyrics with double entendres, metaphors and imagery to show the ability of my songwriting skills. I had also worked with Lauren to find her key and show off her range in the best way possible. In this case it was in the key of C. From previous research on Lauren's music social medias, I have found that her voice was best with long drawn out notes opposed to fast changing melodies. As a result, I wrote the melody in accordance with this. After the first song I produced failed to sit well with Lauren's voice, I had started from scratch to perfect this one. I created a piano ballad as a skeletal structure and thought up chord progressions suited to the tone of the lyrics. In the verse the chords are bleak. However, the chorus chords are brighter and the lyrics are more hopeful, and the drop is triumphant. I deliberately made the song this way to have a sense of chronological order to the track. I had Lauren send me 3 vocal takes of the song and spliced, tuned and edited them. However, any vocal takes Lauren had sent me only came through one side of my headphones. This was a problem because it meant I had to pan them correctly. However, this was difficult and the outcome was unsatisfying. After completing what we thought was a final version of the song, lockdown rules had been lifted and Kim, Lauren and I decided the best course of action would be to go to the studio and record the vocals properly. In our first session we recorded track 1. I had shown Lauren the proper singing techniques I had researched for recording, e.g. singing from the chest, distancing from the mic correctly and timing. After multiple takes we added harmonies to the chorus to signify the structure. Being in the studio with Lauren meant that I could show her how to harmonise with the track, which made it significantly easier than before. I equalised Lauren's vocals and panned them on each side to fill out the chorus. After we had finished recording, I created the drop using techniques like key chaining, risers and sweepers to add sibilance to the track. I sent the files to Craig in a WAV format as it is the safest way for a lossless compression. For track 2, I had little to do with the composition of the song other than the second verse and rap parts. Kim and Lauren had created the song and showed it to me in the studio. After we got a basic piano and drum beat to record over, we took multiple takes and continued adding harmonies and double tracking. The only problem we had was a minor inconvenience of the sound of metal barrels being stacked outside of the studio, but that came to its fruition in half an hour or so. Since the previous song was quite melancholy, I decided to make the new one upbeat and fast paced to show our diversity as a band while still maintaining the essence of a synth pop band. I used a fast paced drum beat and bass line to complement the slow lyrics. In turn, I added a rap verse to assort the mix. I focused primarily on a catchy bass line. The song started with a piano composition to smooth the tone, then to contrast to a heavier drum beat. After I created all the instruments for the backing track, I used automation on high cuts and low cuts to add more depth. I had also used key chain compression again for all the other instruments so that percussion could stand out more. Other techniques included were vocoding Kim's vocals and multi-directional use of the instruments. After I had done this, I sent Craig the files for him to repeat the process.
My role within Neon Daydream involved editing, mixing, and applying some basic mastering techniques to each of the tracks. I also wanted to help out with our promotions, where I used the teaser 16 second, 50 seconds audio segments and applied them to a neon footage, and these videos were shared on our social media sites. Once receiving the audio stems from Aaron, I imported them into Pro Tools and recorded a premix. This was so that we could see the results after the mixing process. I gain staged all the channels and applied EQ and compression where it was required and made sure the levels were all near -6 dB. It gave me plenty of headroom for future processing. With adding in auxiliary buses for reverbs and delays for both the room and the vocals, I also turned my attention to the kick. I liked the attack of the kick, but I thought the low end was needing some attention. So I applied another auxiliary track which had a signal generator at around 55 Hz just to beef up that low end, which was triggered by the noise gate. After looking at the vocal side, I cut some of the breath and sibilance so that they weren't being affected during the EQ process and heard throughout more of the mix. I also added, for the lead vocals, I did some vocal staging to open up the vocal part and help with stereo imaging. At the end of the song, you can hear a high-pass filtered piano part at the fade out, and I added that in just to kind of give it a bit more of a creative element to the end in the mixing process to make sure that the song was within the loudness standards of -14 dB. I used the Waves loudness meter. For the second track, Retraction, I received the audio stems again from Aaron and I imported them into Pro Tools and recorded the premix. I again staged the channels and added the process, the EQ and compression where applicable. This session had a lot more stems in it than the previous one, Rise, and due to the processing power required, I did a lot of my processing through the submixing, but to get more of accurate results, I did obviously use 7-band EQs and some compression on the individual channels. I also used for the drum mix, submix channel, I used quite heavy parallel compression to give it that punch that the song required. Instead of using a signal gen on the kick for the low end, I focused on duplicating the kick channel and applying a bit more of a high pass, low pass type filter on the kick to give it a bit more of an attack, but still keeping that punch of the low end. I spent a lot of time on the vocals for this session, as after researching the style of singing that Aaron had done, quite hip hop rap section, I found that vocal staging, which I did some on the track Rise, this track really kind of, it was really focused on this track. I originally ended up with, I was given 3 tracks for these, 3 or 4 tracks for the hip hop section. I came out with about 9, maybe 10. This allowed this part of the song to become very prominent in the mix, which is what we really wanted. And I think it gave it the presence that it deserved. I also ended up cutting and boosting some of the vocal parts, more so with the sibilants, which I used a couple of plugins for. But I also, due to the lack of some plugins, I ended up doing it by myself in the sense of cutting into the sound waves and reducing the volumes where it was required. Again, it's the same for the Rise track. I used the Waves WLM plugin to make sure that I was in the minus 14 dB ballpark.
The open day for our project was the 26th of April. This is where we submitted 2 50-second teasers that the public could comment and give us feedback on what could be improved, what they like, etc, etc. We uploaded some Instagram teasers prior to this that were a bit shorter than the 50 seconds in order to kind of entice our audience and convince them kind of to go on and vote for us on the site. We received a lot of positive feedback from this open day, receiving around about 50 forms, most of which was all extremely positive. The criticism we did get was polite and constructive, and from the information we did get from the public, we were able to make changes to both tracks that would better them for final submission. Obviously, the COVID pandemic did affect our project quite a lot, like it did many others, but we did find ways to work around it. Working online all the time had its own difficulties with being able to get everybody online at the same time and communicating when someone asked a question, but we did work around that and we still managed to roughly meet all of our deadlines, and overall we are extremely happy with the result we've produced.
Afraid, we stand on the edge, waiting for the day to come to an end. But I know I will stay in place. This time reveals itself, the pain inside will die. But in the sunrise I'll be there. The dawn of our love will truly fill the air. We're building a memory upon our dreams, discovering a love that is oh so rare. So tell me, what made you stay? Why did we both not run away? So tell me about the way I did when we fell away. tear me apart. The way I did when we fell
So here I've just put in some images from both the Instagram and the Twitter page, just to give you an idea of how these were kind of set up. We went for like a running theme mainly on the Instagram, and I felt that the Instagram page was what drew in the biggest audience, so I focused on that being the most aesthetic I could get it, to really lay it out and make it look eye-catching. Twitter was all about just having like fun little tweets and stuff to try and engage people, but we didn't get as big a following on Twitter, so it wasn't like my key focus to keep people